Children of the Longhouse by Joseph Bruchac. Chapter 12. The Game. When Big Tree threw the ball high into the air, a great ululating cry went up from both the players and the many people watching. Some of the younger players watched the ball with their sticks raised, ready to catch it, but Ohkwa'ri was not one of those. He kept only one eye on the ball, and it was wise that he did so. Swinging his stick toward Ohkwa'ri's head, a slender young man with his face painted red on one side and white on the other sprang forward even before the ball game began to arc downward. Ohkwa'ri hardly had to move his arm to lift up defender, for his stick seemed to leap up to block the blow even before Ohkwa'ri saw it coming. Ohkwa'ri pivoted to one side and swung his legs so that the young man who had struck at him tripped and went flying onto his face. Ohkwa'ri did not look back. Dust was already rising around him, and people were shouting or grunting with effort. The rhythm of bodies striking bodies and sticks striking sticks was almost like the sound of music to him, and he knew he would have to move his feet in this dance or be danced upon. He ran forward, staying well to the side of the wolves of the old men's team, who had captured the ball as it came down and were passing it back and forth to each other as they advanced across the great field. It was not an easy passage. The players on both sides fought hard, and already several men on each side had limped or been dragged off the field. A broken stick and the churned-up earth behind them showed how fierce the first contact between the teams had been. Ohkwa'ri did as his uncle had instructed. Although he was a wolf, he stayed back and did not get into the way of the larger, stronger men as they moved the ball. But his eyes were quick, and he saw his sister waving to him from the hill above the far side of the field. Otistia, like many others not on the field, was running along the hilltop, keeping pace with the players. Ohkwa'ri was not sure how it was that he had known she was there. Then he remembered the bat and the flying squirrel painted on their foreheads. Perhaps their medicine was working. Ohkwa'ri raised his stick in acknowledgement of his sister's wave. She gestured, and he looked where she was pointing. There was a clear space in the melee of men. He signaled back to Wideawake, who was running behind the first line of men guiding the play. He! Ohkwa'ri shouted. It was the cry they had agreed upon to be given when a player saw a good opening. He pointed with his stick toward a weakness in the right flank of the defenders on the young men's team. Unlike the old men, they were not guarding the width of the field, but concentrating their strength where the ball was in play. There was an open lane there. It had been Ohkwa'ri's idea that one of the players on his team would make this his way to that opening, but that was not what happened. He saw Wideawake rush forward, running with the long strides of a deer. Wideawake dodged one defender, cross-blocked another to the ground, and then was given the ball. He ran back in the opposite direction, taking the young men defenders who were closest by surprise. Among them was a figure with a red and white face that Ohkwa'ri could tell, even from a distance, was Grabber. Suddenly, to the surprise of everyone, especially Ohkwa'ri, Wideawake turned and made a mighty throw of the ball. It flew through the air like a swallow taking wing, high above the heads of everyone on the field. As Ohkwa'ri watched it, thinking that he had never seen anyone throw a ball so far, he realized that the throw was aimed at him. By running backward, Wideawake had drawn everyone, except for Ohkwa'ri, even farther away from that open flank. Once again, it was as if his stick had a life of its own. It seemed to quiver, and then Ohkwa'ri lifted it up to catch the ball, which struck so hard as it came down that it spun him halfway around as he started to run. He ran without looking back, so fast that many on the field could not tell where the ball had gone to, and headed for the place where it would have landed, rather than following Ohkwa'ri. But the people watching the game knew where the ball had gone. Ohkwa'ri could hear many of them shouting and screaming encouragement to him. He heard the sound of pounding feet other than his own and looked to the side. Two other players on the old men's team were not far behind him, and he slowed to let them catch up. It was Red Duck, a burly grandfather who still was amazingly sure-footed, and Quick Eyes, a lanky young man whose first child had been born only a few days ago. Ohkwa'ri signaled with one hand that he would pass the ball to them. No, Red Duck signaled back. Go on. The two players spread out, one to each side of Ohkwa'ri. Ohkwa'ri understood. They were not doing this to help him. They were doing this because he was representing Thunder's voice in this game, being played for the old man's health. He knew that close behind there were many men trying to catch up to them, but remembering Thunder's voice made him feel stronger and more determined. So he did as Red Duck urged and ran faster, cradling the ball in Defender's webbing. They were passing through the woods now, and Ohkwa'ri watched closely as he ran, weaving through the trees. It was well that he did so, for he saw the elbow of a member of the young man's team sticking out from behind an elm tree at the far edge of the woods ahead of them. Either someone had been too lazy to run the length of the field, or the young men had not been completely foolish and had posted at least one defender to wait in the forest. Ohkwa'ri gestured to Quick Eyes. Quick Eyes saw and crossed in front of Ohkwa'ri, heading for the elm while Ohkwa'ri swung away from it. The defender behind the tree leaped out, but was blocked by the quick side by Quick Eyes. Now Ohkwa'ri was in the open field, and he could see the goalpost ahead. There was a pain in the side as he ran, but he did not slow down. There, standing not far from the goalpost, was a small group of people. Ohkwa'ri recognized almost all of them. One of them was Thunder's voice. Clearly the old man, who was smiling broadly, had decided to take up his post near the goal that the old men's team would strive to reach. And there was Otistia, and herons flying. Both mother and daughter had their hands balled into fists as they shouted something. As Ohkwa'ri came closer, he realized they were yelling his name. Behind them stood the tall and Antak man, with his bare headpiece. One arm raised in the air, he too was shouting Ohkwa'ri's name, though he was not pronouncing it correctly. Ohkwa'ri raised his stick high, darted it toward the goal, and struck the post with the ball, scoring the first goal for the old men's team. There was little time to celebrate that first goal. The ball was carried back to the center of the field and was again put into play. This time the players surged back and forth, but no side was able to quickly gain an advantage over the other. Elder Brother Sun moved the width of 3 hands across the sky, but still no further goals were made. Although Ohkwa'ri ranged back and forth across the field, the ball did not come close to him. Still, he saw plenty of action, and there were bruises on his chest and a cut on one cheek from those times when he and other players came into contact with each other. He had been careful, though, to keep his eyes on the small group of players on the young men's team, whose faces were painted red and white. It was not hard to watch for them, for they were in the forefront of every play. When the ball had been brought back to the start of the action for after Ohkwa'ri's goal, he had seen Grabber looking at him. For a moment it almost seemed as if there was some admiration in the older boy's gaze, but then the look of anger clouded Grabber's face once more. Now Grabber was playing hard, playing as well as the best players on the old men's team. As one of the old men made a throw, Grabber intercepted it and threw the ball over to Eats Like a Bear. Eats Like a Bear roared as he broke through the old men's defenders, like a boulder rolling over a line of saplings. The young men's team followed him. Ohkwa'ri, who had been struck in his stomach by someone's knee, found himself lying on the field. Red Duck, who was limping badly and using his stick as a cane, reached a hand down to help him up. "Help me over to the side," Red Duck said. "My right knee has just remembered that I am a grandfather, and it is ready to rest." By the time Ohkwa'ri returned to the field, the ball was already being thrown up to start play once more. A spectacular goal had been scored by Grabber, and the two teams were now even. As the ball came down, the old men caught it, and at a signal from Wide Awake, the wolves and the real bears changed ranks. The play took the young men by surprise, and the old men quickly reached the woods in the middle of the field with the ball. Ohkwa'ri followed. He had tripped as they changed ranks, and had the wind knocked out of him. Now he was far back behind his teammates who had once been at the front line of attack. It was getting late in the afternoon. Soon the game would be over. Then he saw the place where a small rocky ravine cut into the edge of the woods. Ohkwa'ri ran toward the ravine. The men with the ball had passed by there, but had been careful not to come too close. The footing was treacherous, and the slope was steep. Only someone who was a bit foolhardy would try to cut through there. However, Ohkwa'ri thought, if I am careful and I do not run headlong, I will manage to catch up with the others. He looked up to the hilltop and was pleased to see that Otistia was no longer in sight, though he recognized the tall figure of the Anantak man. He did not wish his sister to see him take this dangerous shortcut. As Ohkwa'ri ran into the ravine, he kept his eyes open. He remembered how close he had come to stepping on the rattlesnake, and he knew this ravine, too, was a home for snakes. Defender throbbed in his hand, as if trying to warn him, and he held more firmly onto his stick. The edge of the ravine was now very steep, and the slope pitched off to one side. If he fell here, he would surely do more than just bruise himself. Otistia's words about being more careful echoed in his mind, and he became even more alert to everything around him. It was that alertness which saved him. He heard the faint scrape of a moccasined foot on the path behind him. Without thinking, he ducked low. Grabber's stick, which had been swung at the side of his head, brushed his hair as it whizzed past him like a striking hawk. Defender throbbed in Ohkwa'ri's hand. As he turned, still bent low to the ground, he thrust the butt of the stick into the pit of Grabber's stomach. The war cry, which Grabber had just begun to shout, ended with a loud woof as the blow from Ohkwa'ri's stick knocked the wind out of the big young man. Grabber stumbled back and placed one hand against the rock wall of the ravine. His red and white painted face was so filled with rage, it did not look like that of a human being. "Grabber," Ohkwa'ri said, trying to keep his voice from trembling. "This is not Tekwaarathon. Let us go back to the field." Ohkwa'ri's words did no good. Grabber lifted up his stick and began to swing it back and forth in front of him. "Ohkwa'ri," he said, in a voice that was more frightening because it sounded so emotionless, "you will not make a fool of me again." Then he leaped forward like a panther. Grabber's first blow was so powerful that Ohkwa'ri felt his arm go numb as he blocked it. Grabber stepped back to give himself room to swing again with all of his force. They were close to the edge now, and Ohkwa'ri sensed the emptiness at his back. Then, as the light of the day started to fail, Ohkwa'ri remembered the bat. The bat darts and flutters, and no one can strike it. Ohkwa'ri feinted to one side, and then the other, and then struck at Grabber's leg, throwing him off balance. Grabber swung his stick back, hitting Ohkwa'ri in the side. But the blow had little force to it, and as Ohkwa'ri stumbled back toward the wall of the ravine, Grabber suddenly disappeared from sight. It had happened so quickly that Ohkwa'ri could not believe it was real. He blinked his eyes. There at the top of the slope was Grabber's Tekwaarathon stick, and there at the bottom, his leg twisted at a strange angle, was Grabber. Ohkwa'ri went quickly down the slope, taking care that he did not dislodge any of the stones. The older boy looked up at him. The sweat that streamed from his forehead had washed away most of the red and white paint, and Ohkwa'ri could see clearly that Grabber was in great pain. "Ohkwa'ri," Grabber said, his voice weak and confused. He reached out his hand. Ohkwa'ri put his hand into Grabber's, but he did not pull him up. He could see that Grabber's leg was very badly hurt. As he fell, it had twisted beneath him and broken. The bone showed through the skin just above his knee, and the blood was starting to come pulsing out. With such bleeding, Grabber might die. Ohkwa'ri let go of Grabber's hand and put both of his hands just above the place where Grabber was bleeding. Grabber groaned as Ohkwa'ri did this, but Ohkwa'ri did not remove his hands. Like all hunters, Ohkwa'ri knew how blood travels through the body, flowing in small rivers. He felt for the heartbeat in Grabber's leg, found it, and pressed there. The blood flow slowed. "Do not move," Ohkwa'ri said. Grabber reached out and grasped Ohkwa'ri's shoulder. "You will not leave me?" "No," Ohkwa'ri said. "Help will come." But even as he said it, Ohkwa'ri was worried. He could feel his hands growing tired as he pressed to stop the flow of blood. Then, because he could think of nothing else to do, Ohkwa'ri began to sing. He sang a song that herons flying had sung to him when he was a very small child. It was the song to be sung when you were in the need of a friend. And as he sang, he thought of the bat and the flying squirrel, the two friends who had helped each other in the great ball game. "We heo, o, we heo." As he sang, his hands felt stronger, and it seemed as if, even in his pain, Grabber was less frightened. Ohkwa'ri heard the sound of feet on the rocks. He turned and looked and thought he saw a bear coming toward them. He blinked his eyes and saw that it was not a bear. It was the tall Anantak man, with the bear headpiece leaping agilely down the rocks to them. Close behind him was Otistia. The Anantak man pulled a pouch from behind his back. He took a cord from it and wrapped it about Grabber's leg above the wound. Ohkwa'ri removed his hands. The blood was not flowing. The Anantak man nodded at him. "You do good, Gwali," the Anantak man said. He took something from his pouch and placed it in Grabber's mouth. "Bite," he said to the older boy. Then he reached down and gave Grabber's foot a quick jerk, setting the bone back in place. Grabber's eyes opened wide, and then he fell back in a faint.